Let me ask you something. When was the last time you checked on how much your overhead costs are eating into your profits? Pretty sure just because you're used to paying for them, you stop to check if you still need to be paying for all of them, right? So today I wanted to talk to you about something that's often overlooked but can make or break your construction business: overhead costs. Now, I know that as a contractor or construction business owner, you're probably more focused on getting the job done, managing your crew, making sure that materials are ordered on time, and meeting deadlines. And that's what you should be doing. But here's the thing: if you are not actively managing your overhead costs, it's going to eat into your profits without you even realizing it. Think of it as a quiet killer of your business. Think about it like this: you've got the obvious costs for every job, right? The materials, labor, maybe equipment rentals. That's the stuff you see right in front of you. But what about the other costs? The rent for your space, insurance, utilities, and gas for trucks, even cost of accounting software. These are your overhead costs, and if you're not paying attention to them, it's like having a leak in your budget. The money just slips out without noticing until it's too late. Now, let's break it down and talk about exactly what overhead costs are. How can you track them and how you can keep them under control to maximize your profitability? Because when you are running a construction business, every single dollar counts, and I'm going to show you how to keep more of those dollars in your pocket. So what are overhead costs? Overhead costs are the expenses that keep your business running but aren't directly tied to any one specific project. They're the cost of doing business, plain and simple. These include rent or mortgage for your office or warehouse space, insurance, general liability, workers' comp, vehicle insurance. All that stuff adds up. Utilities, electricity, water, internet, phone lines, salaries for staff who aren't working directly on job sites. Think admin staff, your bookkeeper or office manager, your fuel and vehicle maintenance, your office supplies, marketing costs, software subscriptions. These costs don't change whether you've got one job or 10 going on. They're just always there. That's why if you're not careful, overhead can pile up and suddenly you're working hard but wondering why your profits aren't where they should be. Here's a real example for you. I was working with a contractor who was doing pretty well. At least that's what he thought. His projects were coming on time, clients were happy, and technically he was making money. But at the end of the year, his profits were a lot lower than expected. The problem? His overhead costs were out of control and he didn't even know it. He hadn't factored in things like cost of fuel, the wear and tear on his trucks, or how much his office expenses were actually eating into the bottom line. Once we started tracking all those costs, we realized how he was losing tens of thousands of dollars each year. And that's money he could have been reinvesting into his business or even taken home. So what do? Step one, track everything. The first step is to get your overhead under control, is to track it. You can't manage what you don't measure. So if you're not already doing this, you need to start tracking every single overhead cost in your business. This means keeping a record of every expense that isn't directly tied to a project. It can be tedious, but trust me, it's worth it. Use a good accounting software like QuickBooks Online that can help you categorize expenses and give you kind of a real-time snapshot of where your money is going. You can even set up different categories for overhead like insurance, supplies, so you know exactly where you're spending. Let me give you a quick example. One contractor I worked with was shocked when we looked at his overhead and realized how much he was spending on fuel. His crews were driving all over the place, sometimes taking the long way to job sites or making unnecessary trips. We put a system in place to track mileage and fuel use, and he ended up cutting his fuel costs by 20% and started adding those costs to his estimates. That's a big deal over the course of the year. Step 2, budget for overhead. Once you've started tracking your overhead, the next step is to create a budget for it. Budget for your overhead just like you would for a project. Let's say you know your insurance costs $1,000 a month, your rent is $2,000, and your fuel costs are around $500. Add those numbers up and make sure you've accounted for them when pricing your jobs. If you're not budgeting for these costs, you're either going to end up eating them or you'll have to dip into your profits to cover them. So a good rule of thumb is to set aside a percentage of your revenue to cover overhead. For a lot of construction businesses, that number is around 10 to 20%, but it can vary depending on your specific business. But I advise to stay below 12%. The key is knowing what your number is so you can plan accordingly. If you want to use the spreadsheet I created for my clients for business budgeting, go to the description under this video and follow the link to the free resource I created that is called 5 must-haves for nailing your numbers. Step 3, minimize unnecessary expenses. Not all overhead costs are necessary. Some are just eating up your profits for no reason. Once you've tracked everything and created a budget, go through your overhead expenses and see where you can cut back. For example, do you really need that huge office space if most of your team is out in the field? Or could you move to a smaller office and save on rent? What about that software subscription you're not really using? Are there cheaper options out there? Another place where contractors tend to overspend is marketing. Don't get me wrong, marketing is very important, but are you getting a return on the money that you're putting into your ads? If not, it might be time to rethink your strategy and focus on things like word of mouth referrals, which are often more valuable in construction anyways. Make sure that you track and analyze the data when it comes to marketing to see what is working and what is just eating up your cash. Step number 4, automate where you can. Automation isn't just for the tech industry, it's for construction businesses too. If you're still handling all of your overhead manually, you're wasting time and money. There are plenty of tools out there that can help you automate tasks like invoicing, payroll, and even fleet management. For example, companies like ADP will set up automated payroll each month if your employee has a fixed pay each month, and they will take care of all the filings so you wouldn't have to do anything. I have been working with ADP for a very long time now, and they offer my clients 30% off their subscriptions. So reach out to me if you would like to get set up with ADP. Step number 5, review regularly. The last step is to review your overhead regularly. The cardinal rule of thumb is don't just set it and forget it. Overhead costs change over time. Maybe your rent goes up or you have to hire more office staff. So you need to keep an eye on it. Make it a habit to review your overhead expenses every single quarter at least. One construction business I worked with started reviewing their overhead costs monthly, and they noticed they were spending way too much on last minute supply runs because they weren't planning their material orders well. By getting more organized with their ordering process, they cut down on unnecessary trips, which saved both fuel costs and labor hours. And the best part, they didn't have to increase their prices to improve their profit margins. They simply managed their overhead better, and the profit follows. Managing your overhead costs is one of the most important things you can do to improve your bottom line. It doesn't seem glamorous, but it's essential. If you're not paying attention to where your money is going outside of your job costs, you're missing a big opportunity to increase profitability. So start tracking everything, create a budget, minimize unnecessary expenses, and review your overhead. These simple steps will help you keep more of the money you earn and ensure that your construction business stays profitable no matter what. If you're feeling overwhelmed by your costs, remember, you don't have to fix everything at once. Start by taking small steps, and before you know it, you'll have your overhead under control and your business in a much stronger position. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Thank you for watching, and until next time.